What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you guys want to support the channel, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. You'll get a free $15 whenever you sign up, and you'll be supporting the channel. Additionally, you can become a patron. Not only is that the best way to support the channel, but you'll get to vote weekly on a deck tech for me to cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Now let's get into today's Precon upgrade with the Jund Precon. And guys, I'm really excited about this commander. Now she does have kind of the Grim Hireling effect, right? Whenever you deal combat damage to a player, you get a Termagoyf token, which is kind of wild. Now, notably, a lot of people think you can only do that once per turn, but it's once per turn per player, right? So if we have 3 opponents, we can get 3 Termagoyf tokens per turn. So that's kind of the direction you want to take this girl. You want a little bit of an evasion, you want a little bit of trample, that way to ensure you can deal damage to each opponent each turn very consistently. That other ability is also kind of busted here. Now, I don't think it's very powerful with the Lagoyf type because there's honestly just not a lot of great Lagoyfs, but the ones in the deck that we're keeping in the deck are really powerful, right? Where you have this new one, the Pyrogoyf, that deals damage whenever a Goyf enters the battlefield. So as long as we're triggering her very consistently every turn, we're going to get 3 of those Termagoyf tokens and we're going to deal a lot of damage. If this is on the battlefield and we have our engine online, we will win the game pretty soon. The other one is a mill Termagoyf. So this one's really good at milling. Not only does it have menace, it also has lifelink, and it will return a card that we mill to our hand, which is very powerful, as long as it's a creature, right? So that's going to be very good. I also want to talk about her interaction with Maskwood Nexus, right? This turns all of our creatures into Lagoyf types. So whenever we cast something like a Buried Alive, we're going to throw 3 Lagoyfs into the graveyard, and they can be anything, right? Since we have Maskwood Nexus on the battlefield. And we're essentially just going to take those 3 creatures and shove them onto the battlefield. So you could take this in a weird combo route, but that's not what we're going to do here. It's just something I wanted to go over. We're going to be just trying to trigger her ability as many times, very consistently, giving our creatures evasion, making it hard for our opponents to block them, and being sure that we have enough evasive creatures to get in on our opponents very consistently every turn, and we're going to do that on a budget. Some of the non-budget upgrades I will talk about briefly before I get into the non-budget upgrades that we're going to put into the deck is your Grim Hireling, your Professional Facebreaker, right? If these cards just synergize amazing with the strategy already, because again, the strategy of this deck is to deal as much damage, or at least deal 1 damage to each opponent each turn. Another thing that's very powerful with this deck that really doesn't fit into the budget playstyle is extra combat steps. If we can generate extra combat steps, that will reset our commander's ability basically, and will allow us to trigger her even more times. So just something to think about if you want to upgrade this deck. But without further ado, let's get into these Precon upgrades. Before we get into today's budget upgrade, I did want to make you guys that deal again. If we get this video to 500 likes, I will build a full non-budget version of this deck. Also, be sure to stay till the end of the video. I'm going to be talking about some non-budget options that are really going to power this deck up at the end of it. The first thing we should cover is what the heck a Termagoyf token is. Now, these are basically just going to be creatures, and they're going to have power and toughness equal to the amount of card types in everybody's graveyard plus 1. Now, since it targets everybody's graveyard, we don't have to focus too hard on getting every card type in our graveyard to buff them up, but we did include a couple cards with multiple typings that do get thrown to the graveyard very early. That's just going to help us in our strategy. Goldhound and Shigeki are perfect examples of this. Goldhound's just going to be a little bit of ramp, and it is a artifact creature, so it's going to count as 2 types. And then Shigeki is also going to be amazing here. It's going to mill us a little bit, get more cards in our graveyard, and then whenever we channel it, it is an enchantment creature. So again, that chucks 2 more card types into the graveyard for us. Bramble Familiar, I've just been playing this in my mill or graveyard strategies a lot more. The fact that it's so flexible and it's a mana dork in the early game, and then in the late game it's this massive mill spell that cheats creatures into play is just very useful. Ob Nixilis can kind of be amazing here as well. A lot of people don't actually run Planeswalkers in EDH, so we're going to probably have to run a couple just to get them in the graveyard, and Ob Nixilis does this amazingly. Not only can we very easily, in the right scenario, sacrifice a 7 power creature to instantly draw 7 cards, but Obnixilis is literally just 3 turns away from dying, right? We plus him and then -2 him twice and he ends up in the graveyard, and hopefully our opponents just attack and kill him. Screeching Scorch Beast is actually solid tech here. Not only does it mill our opponents, allowing us to get more card types in the graveyard, but it's also going to generate us a board state of these 2/2 zombies that will allow us to connect with our opponents each turn easier. The Master Multiplied is going to be put in this deck as well. It's kind of perfect, right? The fact that it has Myriad and we're trying to deal 1 damage to each opponent every single combat is perfect. And then on top of that, it does just get out of control very quickly, so this is going to be amazing in the deck. Hornet Queen, kind of the same thing. It enters the battlefield, we get 4 of those 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch, so they're going to be pretty hard to block, and this will allow us to easily trigger our commander consistently. Blade of Selves gives one of our creatures Myriad, so you can just shove this on your best ETB and then go to town. Notably, this does work with our commander if the Master Multiplied is on the battlefield, and that can just create some really crazy board states. For instance, assuming Blade of Selves is on our commander and the Master Multiplied is on the battlefield, when our commander attacks, we'll get 2 tapped and attacking tokens. Whenever we deal combat damage to each opponent, we're going to net 9 Termagoyf tokens. That's just crazy. And then it just gets more insane from there because we don't have to sacrifice those legendary copies we made off of our commander. So next turn, we're probably just going to close out the game. Anduril also seemed like a no-brainer here, right? With just our commander, we can attack, and then we get 2 of those 1/1 white flying spirit creature tokens going at the other 2 opponents. So this will allow us to, again, trigger our commander very consistently. Orin Frostfang is pretty solid here as well. Not only is it very good card advantage, but it's going to give all of our creatures death touch. This is some very useful evasion that really disincentivizes anybody from blocking us, again, allowing us to trigger our commander very consistently. Sandstorm Salvager seems pretty good here, right? We only have to pay 2 mana, and then we're putting a 1/1 counter on each token you control, and then they gain trample until end of turn. So once we get a few Goyf tokens, we can just buff them up, give them all trample, and then our Goyf tokens will become the enablers to trigger our commander to net more Goyf tokens, and they're just going to get bigger in the process. Not to mention, Salvager enters the battlefield with a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature, right? So this allows us to have Sandstorm Salvager, our commander, and the artifact creature, 3 different creatures to attack all of our opponents. Loyal Apprentice was just very low CMC, pretty cheap. It does exactly what we want, just makes an evasive creature every turn, so it's going to be a no-brainer here. Rankle, Master of Pranks, is kind of perfect in this deck. Now, I would only include Rankle in a deck where you're very comfortable with choosing all 3 modes every single turn, and this is that deck. He's very flexible, right? We can kind of use him as a loot effect to draw some cards, discard some cards. We're going to be sacrificing a creature very consistently since we're generating a creature off of Rankle, assuming we're connecting, right? And then that's just going to starve our opponents of their resources. We're making them discard cards, putting more card types in the graveyard, we're making them sacrifice their board state, and we have a choice to let them draw a card or not. So in the right scenario, once we get ahead, we can just deprive our opponents of all of their resources. Canopy Covers is one of those cards that's not sexy at all. You look at it, it doesn't do anything super impactful, nothing flashy, but it's been one of my favorite cards to see in my hand very consistently in decks where you care about the commander. It essentially gives your commander hexproof and flying for 2 mana in a deck that cares about dealing damage very consistently, so we're definitely going to take that. Guruk's Pack Leader and Outcaster Trailblazer are just going to be solid card advantage cards, right? After 4 types get in the graveyard, which is going to happen very early in the game, every time we create a Goyf token, we're going to draw a card off of these 2 effects. That's going to give us some insane card advantage. Guruk's Uprising, kind of the same thing here, except it also gives them trample. So not only is it an enabler allowing us to trigger our commander consistently, we're also just drawing a ton of cards whenever we're doing that. The Gitrog Ravenous Ride is a no-brainer here. He has trample, he has haste, so he's going to trigger the commander very consistently, and we're consistently making 4/4 or 4/5 bodies at the minimum and sacrificing those to draw 4 cards and put 4 lands into play. Sign me up. Elves of Deep Shadow, Nature's Lore, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, not sexy ads, but again, very necessary to the plan. I like including Kodama's Reach and Cultivate when you have these 5 CMC commanders, right? because if you have 3 mana, you know that you can then get to 5 very consistently. Bane of Progress is my go-to board hate for those artifacts and enchantments whenever you care about creatures' powers, because this guy can get massive very quickly. Smuggler Surprise also seemed like a no-brainer in this deck. We actually care about all 3 modes. Early game we can mill, we can cheat creatures into play, and then it can also protect all of our creatures with power 4 or greater, which is the majority of this deck's creatures. Last but not least, we are including Professional Facebreaker. I know this one is a little pricey, but it synergized so much with the commander, I had to include it. As promised, I'm going to give you 5 non-budget options that I really think would power this deck up. The first one is Grim Hireling, right? This is a no-brainer here. We can net up to 6 treasure tokens a turn while doing exactly what the deck wants to do anyway, and then additionally, we can use those treasure tokens as removal. Greater Good, again, another no-brainer. We can then sacrifice those Goyf tokens to put more cards in the graveyard, draw us into our key pieces, and this is going to make our Goyf tokens bigger in the process. Railway Brawler, again, amazing here. Now those Goyf tokens enter the battlefield and instantly double their power. This card's absolutely insane for 4 mana. I mean, you can say it's 5, but it's 4 mana. Not to mention, you just plot this for 4 mana, then you cast it next turn for free, cast your commander for 5 mana, and you've got a 10 power commander. That's kind of busted. Buried Alive and Entomb, these cards are incredibly flexible, especially Entomb in this deck. Maybe we just want to put another card type into the graveyard. We can do this, but 9 times out of 10, let's be honest, we're grabbing our most powerful Legoyf creature and putting it directly onto the battlefield using our commander's ability. Now, I know we cut a lot of the Legoyfs from this deck because honestly, they're just a 5 CMC version of the token we're already creating, so they really didn't make sense to me, but the ones that we left in the deck, again, are extremely powerful, like our Pyro Goyf. Entomb this onto the battlefield for 1 mana, and you're really cooking. Invasion of Ikoria is also super solid here. Not only is it another battle that we can easily get in the graveyard, but it's also a very powerful card, right? It's a tutor that turns into an 8/8 dinosaur that enables our commander's ability to easily deal combat damage to each opponent. It's kind of almost made for this deck. With that being said, guys, thank you guys for watching. Again, if you want that non-budget version, 500 likes and I will go ahead and flesh it out. I appreciate you guys making it to the end of the video. Shout out to my patrons, Newsome, Praetor, Excessum, and Chicken Salad. You guys are amazing. With that being said, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.